Alright guys, Tech Guy here, and as it's a nice morning today, we're going to take a look at fixing up the sunroof shade on the E46, the 330Ci Tech 1. Now if you've been watching my previous videos on this car, when I first got the car and we did an inspection of all the little bits and bobs that this car's going to need, you'll have seen that the sunroof shade isn't working correctly. So this is very typical of an E46. I had exactly the same problem when I first bought my 330Ci, the black coupe I owned a number of years ago. I bought that car about 13 years ago and that had exactly the same problem. So it was an issue back then, and it certainly can be an issue now as these cars are getting older. So what's up with the sunroof shade? Well, it only moves back a few inches. You can't push it all the way. It's binding up on something, and what happens is the clips either side, they're quite fragile and they can begin to fail pretty quickly on these cars, even when they were relatively young. Now if I open the sunroof up, it will push the shade all the way back, but it is becoming an issue. Guys, it's a problem. We need to get it sorted today. Alright, let's take a look at the parts required to fix your sunroof shade on your E46. Alright, so here we go. We've got the sunroof shade trim clips and sliders here. So these two go on one side and these go on the other side. That's what they look like. And you can see these things are ever so fragile, so it doesn't take much for them to get broken, especially when they start getting a bit older and the plastic starts to get brittle. And these things have a rubber portion that does come apart. Over time it starts separating and then it all comes apart in your sunroof mechanism there. So we've got two of these and we've got a packet that comes with both of these. And what I'll do, I'll leave part numbers in the description below. So like I say, these go on one side, these go on the other, and it almost acts like a model railway. There's a little buffer on the sunroof shade mechanism that just slides and pushes against these one way or another, and then that slides your sunshade backwards or forwards. I'm just hoping that little plastic buffer is still in place, because sometimes they get broken and then lost somewhere behind your headliner. And unfortunately you can't buy that part separately, you have to buy the whole mechanism, which does make it quite expensive. But we'll get things opened up, we'll see if it's in place. If it's missing or it's completely broken, one other solution, we might be able to get one 3D printed. But anyhow, that's the bits that you're going to need to do the job. Right, let's start pulling things apart and get into it. Alright, so to start off with, I think what we'll do is just give all this roof and glass area a bit of a spray and wipe down just to get the muck and the dirt off there, because we're going to be removing the glass. So I can do without all this dropping down all over my interior. So we'll start off with a nice clean work area. I could have really done with washing and drying the car to start off with, but I only have a small window of opportunity to make these videos and get the repair done. So we'll just focus on giving this little area that we're going to be working with a bit of a spray and wipe down, and then we'll get into it. Right, there we go, that's much better. A little bit of quick detailer did the job, so now we have a nice clean area to work with. So the next step is we need to remove the sunroof itself, the glass itself. Now to be able to remove the glass, there's some screws hidden underneath here against the frame. To be able to access them, we need to have the sunroof shade all the way back, and that's where we're going to come up against a problem here, because mine only moves back a few inches. Now if I open the glass completely, it'll move right the way back, but then the problem is the glass is right back inside the roof, so we can't gain access to the screws there. And then if I move it back into position, that sunroof shade is getting pushed back all the way to just shy of a few inches. So we're going to have to mess around with that shade a bit. We might have to force it back out the way just so we can tilt the roof up and then be able to gain access to them screws that are holding the glass to the frame, the mechanism. And then if I move the glass forward again, I wonder if I can grab hold of that shade and just force it back. Let's give that a try. Nah, it's not working. It's forcing the roof back. have to do is put the glass pack in position, and if we tilt it, it might give us a bit of room to force that back. And that is stuck. There we go, bit of persuasion. Now if we take a look up here, you can see there's 3 screws. One there, one there, and one there. And of course we've got the same on the right hand side as well, so we're going to remove all 6 screws now. So there we go, that's the 6 screws now removed, and they take a T20 Torx bit. So what I did, I broke them loose with the 1/4" ratchet, and then I just wound them out with the screwdriver attachment there. And it is worth mentioning, you do want to make sure that the glass is in the tilted up position before you remove the screws, and that's going to make removing the glass later on much easier. So now we've got all 6 of them screws removed, we can now lift out the glass, and obviously we've got it in the tilt position there, so we can get our fingers under the rear edge. Now we do have to be super careful when we're lifting this out. We don't want to drop it on the car and damage the paint, and also this is made out of glass, so it's going to break very easily if we drop it. So we're going to be very careful removing it from the car, and then we're going to put it in a place where we're unlikely to knock it over or stand on it. So there we go, it's out the way there, it's not going to fall over and smash. It's not in a high foot traffic area, so nobody's going to stand on it. Don't step on it. Right, so next up we need to remove the sunshade itself, but before I do so, it looks like someone's been in this mechanism before and just gone nuts with the grease. It's everywhere, so before we get too carried away, what I might do is just go in with a bit of brake cleaner and a rag and just clean up all that grease, otherwise it's going to get all over the sunshade. It's going to end up everywhere before we finish the job. So to avoid all the mess, I'll give that a bit of a clean up, but when we come to reassemble it all, I will use a bit of lubricant just to do the important pieces there, but the whole thing doesn't need to be covered in grease. So let's give this a clean up first. Right, so that's the mechanism area a little bit cleaner now, so we're not going to risk getting grease all over the sunroof shade fabric underneath the headliner material. So next up we can remove the shade itself, so we're going to pull it forward. And if we take a look over here, we've got these 2 tabs, one there and one there. Now there should be that small buffer piece sitting between the 2 of these. As this is failing, what's happened is it is actually sitting down the back there. Just make it out. Now luckily it looks like the black plastic piece is still intact, which is good, but it has got lost all the way down there. So what we're going to have to do a bit later on is just move this forward so it will sit in between these 2 tabs, because what that does when the mechanism moves is it'll push against these rubber tabs and move the sunshade backwards and forwards. Right, so to be able to remove the sunroof shade itself, we first need to undo these tabs. And there's 2 screws holding them on each. Yeah, so we can't just lift this sunshade right out at this stage, because on these tabs it's got that rubber sort of mouth hanging onto the rail there. So we've got to remove each one and lift them out like that, slide them off the rail, and then that will enable us to lift the sunroof shade up like that, and then slide it out the other end like that. So these take a T10 Torx bit. So now that the screws are removed, we can take a wee pocket screwdriver, just lift up the inner section there and slide them off the rail, just work them off. You can see there has a little rubber mouth, and that's what's hanging onto the rail there. And they do get a bit gnarled up just over the years through use. I've got a new set of them to go on today. Right, so now we can lift the shade out. So we're going to lift it up on the left hand side of the car here, and then we're going to slide it towards ourselves, towards the centre of the car, up and out like that. Alright, so before we go any further, we'll see if we can fish out that slider piece that's sitting down the back here. I managed to pull that forward a tiny bit, just a few millimetres, but what I think I might do is move the sunroof mechanism into a different position, because it's currently in the tilted up position there. If I close that, that should move that wee buffer piece forward, and then that should be in the correct position when we reinstall the sunshade. Right, now I should be able to get hold of that and move it forwards. There we go. So now that'll just sit in the front of that rear tab on the sunshade, and that'll be sat in between the two tabs, and it'll be able to move it backwards and forwards like it should do. So I think what happens over time is them tabs with the rubber mouths on there, they get all chewed up, and this ends up jumping the track, so it ends up on the wrong side of it, and then that's why the shade doesn't operate properly and it gets jammed closed, because you can't slide it back because it's hitting against this. It's sitting on the wrong side, whereas the tab should be on that side, which will allow it to slide back. Make sense? Right, so if we take a look at the sunroof shade here, this is where we removed the tabs on that side, and on this side you've got these wee metal bowed pieces, both ends, and I have a very fragile plastic piece clipped on. This is part of the sliding mechanism on this side of the sunshade. Now these can get broken and go missing over time. They might just get lost behind your headliner inside the roof there somewhere. It's interesting that these still do look intact on this car. I'm wondering if these have been replaced sometime previously in the car's life. But anyway, we've got some new ones, so I'm going to unclip these and clip on the new ones, because these do get worn over time. So these should just push off like so, very easily. Like that. And as you're removing them, just take note which way round they go. So obviously there's two different ways. So if you take a look here, on the upper section they have these little ridges, just tiny little humps there. So it faces the top. And they've got holes underneath, face downwards. So now we can put our new ones on. As you can see, we've got them small humps facing upwards. These just clip into position. Same on this side, the humps towards the top. I've got a nice little slidey action. There we go. Right, now we've got our new tabs here, and with new screws. So we're not going to fit these just yet to the sunshade, because you need to put it back into position and slide these on. There you go. Right, let's get it back on the car then, eh? Right, now over the other side there is a small groove in the track there, so we're going to make sure that we get them tabs on the plastic tabs on that side just pushed in there correctly. There we go, that's located nicely. And you'll know if it's sat in them grooves properly over the other side, because it'll be clear of the track on this side, otherwise it'd be sitting sort of just on the upper edge of the track this side. Right, let's get these tabs installed. And do make sure that buffer piece is sitting in between the two tabs there, so it should be sitting just in front of this rearward tab right there. I'm going to use the original screws because I don't know if you can see it there, but they've got a much coarser thread than these ones that were supplied. So I don't think these are going to bite into the headliner properly, the shade. Right, now before we refit the glass, what I'm going to do is just re-lubricate the moving part. See, I'm not going to coat the whole lot in grease, and instead of grease like the previous person that worked on it used, what we're going to use some of this dry lube. So this is actually for bicycle chains, so basically it's going to dry like a real liquidy wax sort of thing, so it's not going to attract dirt and not get all clogged up with a load of dust and dirt building up in there. I'll just put a small coating on the track as well for them tabs to slide nicely. There we go, so we're not gone mad, just enough, and that'll dry off nicely. And then I'll just give it the same on the other side too. There we go, that's nicely lubed up now. Now before we go and refit the glass roof, the sunroof, just going to check the operation of the shade, make sure it goes backwards and forwards all right, because this is the opportunity now to make any adjustments once the glass is back in place. Obviously we don't have access to the mechanism and the sliders and everything. There we go, that's much better. So before, we could only move it back just a few inches. Now it moves right back nicely. So we'll just smooth it through its operation. That should go right back. As if the glass was going right back. There we go. So that's moved into the perfect position, just left us enough space there to be able to grab the grab handle there. And if we move it forwards, so if the glass was closing and going forwards, that should bring the shade back into the closed position. I'll just finish that off by hand, which is normal. Go in the tilt position. We should be able to slide that back. So you can see what's happened here is that we sliders jumped the track again. So in a tilt position I should have been able to move that right back. So what I might do is just remove the shade again and then see if I can't just bend that tab for the buffer downwards, because it was sitting up a little bit. So I think it's just jumped the tab there again and ended up on the wrong side of it. So we'll remove the shade again, we'll see what we can do with it. Right, so I'll just move the switch in the glass closed position. Open. Closed. Right, I'm going to carefully try and remove the plastic buffer without breaking it. No, it's going to break. So we need to be able to just push that down a tiny bit more. So we don't want to break the plastic piece because we're never going to be able to get another one. We take a look at the slider there. It's only sort of hitting the bottom edge of that. So you can see how it's jumping the track easy, eh? Just need to get some leverage on there to give it a wee bend so it's facing downwards a bit more. Right, now if I move the sunroof backwards and forwards, I can see this side's grabbing that buffer okay, but this side is the one that's slipping underneath, look, with a bit of weight on it. So I wonder if we can get some pliers in there and maybe give that a wee bit of a twist. See what we can do here. It's definitely, I think it's just that the resistance of this sliding, it's slipping underneath. Looks a bit better. If I can give it a bit more, then maybe lubricate these tracks a bit better, that should slide easier, overcome the resistance and not slip under that. I'll give that a little bit of more of a twist. There we go. Now the contact area there's so much better. Before it was almost corner to corner, edge to edge. Now it's still sitting a little bit proud, but hopefully I might have resolved it just enough for it to work. I know I've had to sort of twist it a bit there. It's sitting that way a little bit, but as it's gone like that, it's twisted like that, so it's almost leveled it out, because before it was sort of sitting up at the back. And other than disassembling the whole mechanism, it's almost like that rivet down there's got a bit baggy and it's allowed it to get worn and move up. So just a bit of a running repair. If we can fix that with just that little bit of a twist, we might be all right. We can feed a bit of grease inside there. So I'm working on the theory the freer this sunshade can move, the less force that motor's got to put against it, and hopefully it's not going to slip over the top of them tabs then. You know what, I reckon that's going to be alright. So you guys watch that tab there, we'll send the sunroof shade back and then we'll send it forward and see if it reappears out the abyss there. Yes, that looks like it's done the trick. So there we are, and it's sitting against there, almost full up flush to the top. So that looks like it's resolved the issue. I'll just try it 2 or 3 more times before we go refitting the glass. Fingers crossed. Here we go, big test. That's in the tilt position, and it has shifted it back a wee bit. Yes. Right, so that's still in position, it's doing its job, so I'm happy with that now. So now we can refit the glass. So what I'll do is I'll send the sunshade backwards, so I'll get access to where the screws go, and then what I'm going to do is put it in the tilted position just to give us plenty of room to get the glass reattached. I'll carefully lift this back into place. Go. I'll jump back in the car, and what I'm going to do is refit all the 6 screws back in position, but then I'm only going to do them finger tight. We're not going to tighten them right up because we need to align the glass properly. Right, so that's all 6 screws back in position now, all finger tight. So what I'm going to do now is just lower the sunroof into its fully closed position, and we'll just check the alignment. Right, now as you can see, we're sitting down quite a bit at the back end here. Even at the front end it's not flush. So basically what we're aiming for is at the front we want it either exactly flush or sitting down up to 1 millimetre, And then at the rear, we want it either exactly flush or sitting up to 1mm. So that's the tolerance. So really, you want it just tilted slightly forwards and down. You don't want it sitting proud at the front, because obviously it's going to end up a buffer with the wind. It's going to affect the aerodynamics. You want this sitting up slightly at the rear, because there is a bit of play in this. So I think the theory is when you're heading down the road or down the motorway with the wind slipping over the car, it's going to just push that rear end of it down, and that should flush it all off nicely. So you want to be flush to a mil down at the front and flush to a mil proud at the rear. And the other thing we want to be looking for is you should be able to slide a credit card all the way around the perimeter without it binding up. So that'll give you your adjustment front to rear, left to right. Right, let's shuffle this glass around and get it in the correct position. Right, now I've moved the glass around a bit. I've got it just about right. Got everything tightened down now, all 6 bolts. So let's just take a quick look. So if you take a look there, the glass is just sitting down about 1mm. And at the rear, we're sitting up about 1mm. Just checking this with a business card here. So we'll just check it's not sitting too far one way or another. Feels pretty good to me, so we'll just check the operation one more time. Now everything's back together. It's all right. Try the tilt. That goes back all right now. We can operate the shade regardless of whether the sunroof's open or not. So we'll call that a fix. And I'm pleased with that. Alright guys, so there we have it. That's how you go about fixing up your sunroof shade on your BMW E46. Very common problem on these cars. So if you own one of these cars, if your sunroof shade wasn't broken when you first got the car, it's likely to fail at some point. Anyhow, if you found this video interesting or useful, don't forget to give it a like, and make sure you go and check out the rest of my YouTube channel for more BMW DIY content. Consider subscribing if that's your cup of tea. I'm MTech Guy. Thanks a lot for watching.